Welcome to Beyond the Fundamentals. In this video, we're talking about progressive churches and banner waving. Progressive churches and banner waving. So what do you mean by banner waving? And that's just my limited ability to know what to call it. The idea that we take up the cause of all the different, maybe cross-sectional groups that might be in a congregation, that we take up the cause of those groups and fully endorse everything that they do. This would be a problem no matter what. No matter what the cause was, no matter what the content was. And what I hope is clear by the end of this presentation is that your fundamentalist churches, first of all, let me make it very clear. I do not endorse what the progressive churches are doing. But I also want to say that your fundamentalist churches are doing the same thing with different content, okay? So it's not there's a disagreement about content. There is no more maturity, really, in one or in the other. There are problems with both of them, and we want to address this problem. So we don't endorse what's going on in the progressive churches, but at the same time, we don't want to ostracize and exclude people either, okay? So we're going to talk about what this implies, what this means, okay? For those of you who are new to us, we are on Facebook. We are on X, Twitter, whatever it's being called this week. Follow us there. Every time we do a video, we announce it there. We post it there before we go live so that it can be seen there. So you can check there to see when we're going live. Also, subscribe to this channel, hit the bell icon, like the videos, share the videos. That helps get the word out, and it's wonderful. Richard says it's a great version of this hymn. Oh, let me share it over here. Two places where I see comments. Getting harder and harder to find good music. Most of the Christian songs I used to listen to, I have found to be antithetical. You know what's kind of cool about being on YouTube with everybody kind of spread around? I met Kate at the debate where Jason Breida debated James White, and we had a great conversation, and we arranged for her to make recordings and send them here. And so it'd be interesting if there is other good music that's out there, if we could collaborate and somehow publicize it using this channel. That'd be kind of cool. Because, yeah, I don't like the, let's call it a conveyor belt kind of factory-produced Christian music very much these days. And Be Thou My Vision is she asked me what's my favorite hymn. I told her immediately that's what it was. Also, if you like what you're getting here, we can be supported financially on our webpage. There is a beyondthefundamentals.com donate, or you can go to our QR code there. If you like what we're doing here, you want to see more of it, you want to help support what we're doing here, the more support we get, the more content we can produce. That's exactly how that works. It is a transactional time trade-off for what we can do here, the research and all the time, space, energy, resources that goes into this. So we aren't just replicating some kind of typical Christian doctrine and regurgitating it for this channel. We're trying to do cutting edge thought. And I'm trying to bring you information that takes us all to cutting edge thought on things that we haven't probably been prepared to think about very well. So it does take quite a bit of effort. If you like what's going on here, you want to see more of it, please consider supporting us if you could. There is a verse of scripture, thou hast given a banner to them that fear thee, that it may be displayed because of the truth. Psalm 60 verse 4. Now, the first time that was ever made salient to me, of course, always read this stuff, chapter day to keep the devil away. You're doing your 5 Psalms per day, plus your 1 proverb, plus your few out of the Old Testament and your few out of the New Testament, going through your yearly, daily, reading plan and all that. So, but then somebody, Phil Kidd, I believe, he was selling banners of this verse with a Confederate battle flag associated with it. Yeah. And if you think, yeah, so that's offensive to a lot of people, and understandably so. So I don't think that taking Bible verses and putting it with things like that is a very good idea. A little later on in Scripture, in Song of Solomon, he brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love. Maybe having love as a banner is a good thing, and genuinely mean it, because some of the stuff we're going to show in this presentation, people they say they're for love and they're against hate, but they're weaponizing the concepts to exacerbate rivalry and antagonism, which is not something that we support here. Prudence McFrugal, Jehovah Nissi, the Lord is our banner. Again, I'm taking it from the wrong place. There we go. So thanks for sharing that. So the agenda for today, we're going to talk about a few things like beginner's mind. We have some intro stuff too. We're going to talk about beginner's mind. You're accepted as you are, but you're not okay as you are. We'll double click on that. Giving yourself a realistic assessment. Sloganeering is a mindless death cry. Counseling and guidance should not pre-approve particular paths on behalf of people. Egoic identity attachments should not be promoted or celebrated. We need to cultivate an internal locus of authority. We do not want to foster group level resentment. And then we're going to talk about our scope of perception and our scope of agency, and kind of what that might look like as you go from being a young adult to an older adult to a middle-aged adult, hopefully moving into more maturity as you go. I want to remind everybody that when we look at Christianity on this channel, we're looking at Jesus Christ as the way. We are not looking at a set of doctrines, a set of propositions. Now, doctrine is actually, you might call it way doctrine rather than propositional doctrine, okay? So we believe in doctrine. We fully support doctrine here, but we do not think that biblical doctrine can be captured in a list of man-made propositional statements that show up in something like a statement of faith or systematic theology or something like that, okay? I don't think that actually is doctrine. I think that is anti-doctrine. So we support biblical doctrine. We are not in favor of the oversimplified reductionistic view of doctrine that we see around here. But what we do promote around here, our view of Christianity is not like, I have these systematic theology books right beside me over here. We do not support that as Christianity. That's basically idolatry. Jesus is the way. He was seen as the way. He was not seen as a list of beliefs. Okay, so we're not going to elevate a list of propositional beliefs over and above anybody on this channel. That's just how we do things. That's our view of Christianity here. And then we also want to have a reminder here, above all, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. Love is the fulfilling of the law. Charity, love, agape, the highest priority elevated by Jesus, John, Peter, and Paul is charity. Charity, charity. By this shall men know that you're my disciples, that you have love one for another. Faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. Above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves, for charity shall cover a multitude of sins. Above all things, okay? So charity, agape, love is elevated. So that's trying to say this on the forefront of this video in case we have anybody new here. That is our perspective. That is where we are coming from, okay? Now, I'm going to give you this topic is a little it's a little nerve-wracking to me, because I imagine I'm going to have some people, maybe some traditional Christian types, or at least American traditional Christian types, who the only thing that they will accept is if we moralistically condemn anything that the progressive churches are doing, anything that they are accepting, or any of the people that they are boasting of being accepting of, that sort of thing. And then on the other end of the stick, we got the people who are all about Happy Pride Month and Black Lives Matter and all this, and They will be upset if we don't fully and wholeheartedly endorse every proclivity that everybody has. And what we want to do in this video is demonstrate why both of these are wrong. Both of these are not the way. We neither want to ostracize nor stigmatize people because of where they find themselves right now, nor do we want to come across as endorsing anything or everything about them based on where they are right now. What we endorse is that people should be on a transformational journey and a transformational path moving forward to become better than they are, to become more like Christ, and maybe Ephesians 4:16 edification model, we can play a role in each other's transformation, but the individual must choose and must know and must perceive what the next rung on their ladder of transformation is. As soon as I start to prescribe that by telling you what you can or cannot do, you lose that going to the wisdom gym of making your own decisions. You need to learn to make your own decisions. And one thing we need to help people do is to learn how to make their own decisions and not prescribe for them what they should be doing that we think they should be doing. They have to decide it. And we're going to talk about why that is very important as we move forward. So there's a huge difference between these two things. We aim to strike a balance that does not cross into either one of these boundaries, neither this nor that, neither ostracizing nor stigmatizing people, nor endorsing every proclivity that they have. Because I don't know exactly what tweaks people need to make in order, what is in their zone of proximal development? What are they open to? Jesus says, I have many things to say unto you, however, ye cannot bear them yet, in John 16:12. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 2, 1 and 2, Paul was having a difficult time with saved believers who, he says, you were not able to bear it, neither yet now are ye able, because ye are carnal. So just because somebody claims to be a Christian doesn't mean they are ready to hear all the things or that they're ready to grow into all the things. And so there's so many individuals out there that might be listening at any one time. Okay, we have 18,000 subscribers on the channel. It's impossible for me to prescribe for all 18,000 of them exactly what their next step is on the journey that they are on, because I don't know what journey they are on. Okay, it's difficult enough even when we have one-on-one sessions. That's difficult enough to do it one-on-one. How much more difficult would it be for hundreds and thousands of people? Okay. So we don't want to make either one of these two mistakes of ostracizing and stigmatizing people, nor do we want to endorse people as they are, because we need to recognize that everybody has transformation to do. Everybody has growth to do, and the individual needs to make the decision for what growth they need to do next. And maybe we can help them find that. Maybe we can't. Okay. I took some, well, if I go back to I have some pictures here, but if I go back to the original, this photo here, I actually took this in Boston. I was in Boston, and there's Emmanuel Episcopal Church, and they had a rainbow flag flying, and this was June a year ago. And so the idea for this video started hitting me June a year ago when I walked in front of this church. I was visiting Boston with some friends. And if you go around to the other side of the church, I don't think I have a photo of it, but there was like a Black Lives Matter sign and some other things like that. And I'm like, and then it struck me. Like, I knew, a lot of people get upset with me. They think that I'm becoming progressive or something. I'm like, hey, you're totally missing the message here if you think that's the issue. And I know that there's some problems with the progressive church, and I started getting inklings of it, this whole idea of banner waving, showing the flag, waving the banner, and endorsing all these different antagonistic proclivities that people have. So how do we strike the balance between being able to minister Christ to people without endorsing the things of them that probably need to be changed. And I'm not saying that that's an easy answer. I'm not saying that that's an easy answer. So we've got to find that balance. And I think there's a problem with the institutional church, because if you try to minister to people from within an institutional church, institutional churches are built to scale things. They scale information, they scale patterns, and wisdom cultivation does not scale. That's the problem. And that's why the churches that we have are not cultivating wisdom in anybody. So if you're, say, a Southern Baptist and you find a way to minister to, say, an LGBT person, then you're going to have the Southern Baptist jumping down your throat because you are violating Southern Baptist policies, et cetera, and so forth. And then if they're going to come in and sit on the pew, at what point does a church like that require that somebody make certain kinds of changes before we consider them, holy enough to teach Sunday school? You see, you got all kinds of problems like that, and then you have to have policies that categorize people by group and behavior, rather than one-to-one apprenticeship wisdom cultivation with individuals, meeting them where they are on the journey that they're on. And so that an individual's journey and the policies of an institution probably will not match very well. And so the institutions that we have, that's one of the reasons that the Ephesians 4:16 edification model is so much, that's the more mature edification model than the Ephesians 4:11 through 12 edification model. 11 through 12 is getting a church started, okay? And then you're supposed to move into Ephesians 4:16, 13 through 16 edification model, where you could minister to anybody wherever they are, however you find them, in a way that does not violate any kind of institutional policies or rules or standards that might make people upset and all that sort of stuff. So here's a few pictures of some different churches who have decided they wave the banners. That's why I call it banner waving. So you got to understand, if you're a Christian and this upsets you, then this should also upset you. You hear me? Now I threw those other flags down there in the bottom, those communist flags, on purpose, just to kind of show you what it would look like, what the American flag looks like in a church to people who aren't Americans. Because I know we got audience members who are watching from all around the world. We got people in Australia and South Africa and England, and we got people from all over watching. And what Americans don't realize, somebody once said this to me: the cross did not come wrapped in an American flag. And when you grow up in churches around here, you have Christianity and the Christian heritage. Supreme Court decided in 1856 that this was a Christian nation. You have all kinds of stuff like that. Got wall builders out there. And so for a lot of Americans, especially evangelical Americans, the mixture of patriotism with our version of Christianity goes very well, okay? So when the 4th of July comes around, or Memorial Day, or Veterans Day, we love going around, flying all the American flags, have everybody come in their military uniform and all this kind of stuff. We don't think anything of it. But what we also don't realize is how obtuse that may look to somebody who's not an American. We grew up with it. And other people are probably like, what does this have to do with Christianity? Okay. And we found ways to blend it. We grew up with it. But one thing to think about is that this is off-putting as that might look to you. This is just as off-putting to some people, and rightfully so, perhaps. Something to think about. Romans says, It's not about the rainbow. It's about it being endorsing of politics. Yeah. So yeah, right. So it's exactly what I'm trying to get at without trying to condemn or elevate any particular viewpoint or any particular ideology that people have. Okay. Because let's be real here. Being lesbian or gay or bi or transgender or any of those things is very, very, very different than the political fads associated with those things. It's very, very different. Okay. So we need to understand that. So it really doesn't matter what the content is. It doesn't matter if it's a rainbow flag or some other kind of flag. Doing that level of consciousness banner waving is what we want to be steer clear of and not be guilty of. Okay. So what is if I were to say, what's the signal? If I were to steel man the signal of the progressive church, it would probably be something like this. The signal in progressive churches is that they want to include all and minister to all. Okay. And as far as that's concerned, I would say that's a good thing. All right. If I was down and out in a number of different ways, I would probably feel more hopeful about getting help from a progressive church than I would from a fundamentalist church. Think about that. The noise. So the signal is that they want to minister to all people. They want to include all people. That's signal. There's something there. But the noise is that they don't have the capacity to include the people they want to minister to without bolstering rivalry, egoic attachments, and fueling out-group resentment. So this is the noise of the progressive churches. They're bolstering egoic attachments. What we want to do is the part of you that is not sinning, if you look at Romans chapter 7, verse 17 and 20, there's part of you that's not sinning. All right? It is no longer I that sin, but sin that dwelleth in me. That kind of thing. Well, what's the I that's not sinning? What is that? And in 1 John 3:9, if his seed remaineth in him, he cannot sin because he is born of God. It doesn't mean that your egoic self still isn't missing the mark. It is. But the part of you that has always been the light that lights every man that comes into the world, John 1:9, that cannot miss the mark. It is the mark. It can be clogged up and hindered and thwarted, but it cannot sin because it's born of God. So when you are attached egoically to something, for a church to come along and endorse that attachment is to prevent you from making the separation that you need to make in order to discover the you that's not sinning, as per Romans 7:17, Romans 7:20. Some passages of scripture, Romans 12:2, and be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. The world is a banner-waving world. Take up this cause, take up that cause. We, not being like the world, we don't want to put down one banner and pick up another one. We want to step away from banner waving for any kind of banner that isn't agape itself, genuine agape, not weaponized concept of agape. 1 Peter 1, wherefore gird up the loins of your mind, be sober. And that doesn't just mean don't drink and do drugs. It means don't be all pumped up with hype and that sort of thing all the time. Have gravity about you, about your sensibilities, and hope to the end for the grace that is to be brought unto you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, not fashioning yourselves according to the former lusts in your ignorance, but as he which called you is holy, so be ye holy in all manner of conversation. And this holy here isn't rule following. It's a different way of seeing things, a higher level of perspectival capacity that banner waving consciousness levels do not have. You need to repent of that, go beyond that, and be able to see beyond that. James 1:5, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God, that giveth to all men liberally and upbraideth not, and it shall be given him. One thing I want to point out with this verse is he says, if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. When you look at the banner waving stuff, it's group identity. Group identity. Oh, we all have a flag. We all march under the same banner, that kind of thing. Well, the biblical approach is an individualistic approach. Let him ask of God. So we need to let go of our in-group egoic attachment. I am identified by my affiliation with this in-group, and approach things individualistically, internally. So instead of outsourcing your locus of authority to your in-group that's carrying that particular banner, we move our locus of authority into you, who must discern and decide what you will do. Okay? Some people say, well, I think the Catholic Church is the authority, but you still think that. You see, you have to decide what you think the authority is. At the end of the day, this is going to sound, backslidden and reprobate to a bunch of people and blasphemous. But at the end of the day, you have to decide what you're going to do. There's no external agency making you do something. You have to decide what you're going to do. And if you're going to follow some entity or some other thing, you have to decide to do that. So you need to get used to the idea of working out that decision muscle so that you can make good decisions, have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. In Hebrews chapter 5, verse 14. 1 John 1:4. Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world. And interestingly, when the demon legion shows up, Ann Coulter wrote a book about this called Demonic. And when the demon legion shows up, he says, my name is Legion, for we are many. And Ann Coulter made a really good parallel that when people act as a mass, when they act as a mob, when they act as a group, there's some de-individuation there. It's almost like there is a separate entity that is in control of all those people. It's like they're all demon possessed. And something about being many is a demon in and of itself. So I think that's very interesting to consider, that parallel there. And we're going to talk about de-individuation in a few slides. We have a super chat from Richard V. He says, and thanks for the super chat, Christian patriotism I see today reminds me of the zealots of Jesus' day who thought it was their duty to fight Rome, and it didn't end well. Yeah. Thanks for the super chat. And Roman says, giving yourself to X or Y and not what you really are. Right. The authentic self, or the part of you that is not sinning in Romans 7:17, Romans 7:20. You don't want to give that up in favor of whatever it is you're identifying with, whatever group you're identifying with, whatever banner you're identifying with, whatever transsectionality you might be identifying with. So we want to do something called looking at our agenda starting off with beginner's mind. So let's go to our beginner's mind section. In our beginner's mind section, we have a few passages of scripture I want to look at. And Jesus says, except ye be converted and become as little children, ye shall not enter into the kingdom of heaven. Suffer the little children, forbid them not to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. When Jesus saw it, he was much displeased and said unto them, suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. And Jesus said, suffer the little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. And that first one really jumps out at me. Except ye be converted and become as little children. Well, how do you do that? Okay. How do you do that? There's something called kinesthetic learning. And the slide that you're looking at here really isn't kinesthetic learning. It's more like kinesthetic teaching, but we'll talk about what this is for a second. Kinesthetic learners learn more easily by doing an experience. And by the way, I'm in favor of this. Don't get me wrong. Okay. They profit from opportunities, field trips, role-playing, interviewing. Definition. Kinesthetic learning refers to a learning style where a person learns by utilizing their sense of touch and movement. In this learning style, learning occurs when a person can engage in an activity that activates these senses or requires that they move in some manner. Some examples would be learning through drama, like in history class. Students who struggle with reading long historical accounts may learn better through creating a play, recreating history. Maybe be in the Hamilton play or something like that. Play-based learning. This involves learning during playtime and is common in early childhood education. Now, my opinion on this is that this isn't actually kinesthetic learning. And this isn't bad, don't get me wrong, because this is kinesthetic teaching, more or less. Real kinesthetic learning occurs before the child has words and before the child has an enculturated overlay through which they perceive the world. During that time of early childhood development, that is when real, genuine kinesthetic learning occurs. You're seeing everything for the first time. Like I have a coffee mug here. When you and I look at the coffee mug, we think typically of the functions of it. Oh, I can put liquid in it. I can drink it. It's got a handle. I can hold it with my hand. I can pick it up with my hands. It can carry fluid. I can splash it in my wife's face when she's irritating me. I don't know. We tend to think of the functions of things, but a child at that age who hasn't been enculturated, they see it for what it really is. They don't see all that stuff. They see it fresh. They see it new. And what we often don't realize is that the left hemisphere of our brain is constantly taking everything that comes into our eyes and overlaying on top of it everything that we've learned so far. And so it's actually a very difficult thing to do, to see something as if you are seeing it for the first time. It's kind of a difficult thing to do. And so the idea of beginner's mind is to bring intentionality to perceiving reality this way again, like you did as a child before you had words and before you had an enculturated overlay on which you could, implant everything that you're perceiving. So the idea of beginner's mind is to bring intentionality to perceiving reality in this way again, despite our enculturation. So you started that way in early childhood development, no words, no enculturation. Now you have enculturation and you have language. It's very difficult not to perceive reality, or when you read the Bible, it's very difficult to not perceive it through those things. So the goal of beginner's minds is to be very intentional about shedding off all of that stuff and seeing things fresh and anew, as if you're seeing it for the first time without even language. The world does not come wrapped in a language. We've developed language. And people, especially Christians, we act like the things that are said are the dogmatic ultimate things. But in reality, that which can be said is never the thing. It's never the thing. Like my wife is in the other room. She's working too. If I say the phrase my wife, or even if I say Paula, that is not actually her. Those are just words. And the only reason they might point to the same thing and we have the same idea is because we agree that they do. But the universe did not come wrapped in that language. We have assigned that language, see? The universe, reality comes first, language comes second, and as such, we need to realize that language falls short of measuring up to reality as it really is. So don't put too much stock in language. Kinesthetic learning is what you want to get at. So we have a bunch of banners that can be flown around. So banners, slogans, ideologies, etc. They give people a lens through which to perceive the world, and if it effectively biases them prejudicially for and against certain things associated with the banner or slogan or ideology. Now, over on the left-hand side of that graphic, it may look like an American flag, but that's an Occupy Wall Street flag where all the stars have been replaced with corporate logos. Okay. So it's real easy for a traditional Christian to look at some of these logos and be like, oh, that's bad. I don't like that. It represents something that's not good. God's rainbow has 7 colors. That rainbow only has 6. And you sign all this moralistic thinking that we have going on. But we need to realize that I got a Christian flag over here. I got a don't tread on me flag over here. We have to realize that any kind of banner waving is essentially the same thing as the other kind of banner waving. And what I'm trying to get us to do is dial it back, reel it in, get back away from the banner waving. Don't be a banner waver. Okay? Don't be a banner waver. Now I'm going to invoke spiral dynamics. I'm not going to give a segment on spiral dynamics right now because we've done this many, many times on this channel. Okay. So in spiral dynamics, each one of these colors, the mouse moving over here. Each one of these colors represents a different consciousness level. Okay. And most of the Bible, okay, Old Testament especially, most of the Bible comes to you in purple and red consciousness levels. So mankind as a whole is moving through these consciousness levels kind of as a singular organism, if you will. It's just a way of looking at it. It's not. I'm not making dogmatic statements. Just modeling here, and all models are wrong. Some are useful. Your typical Christianity, the fundamentalism from which I came as a child, independent Baptist, your Calvinist, your provisionist, all that kind of stuff, that is blue. It's blue level consciousness there. Your industrialization, all that kind of stuff is orange level consciousness. And then you have green, which is people who are concerned with something broader than their immediate community and self. Now, second tier consciousness is green to yellow is where you break into second tier consciousness. Okay. All the rest of this down here is first tier consciousness. So first tier consciousness, it all has ego. And the closer you get to second tier consciousness without breaking through, the more ego there is to be had. Okay. So what you might have is you could have a healthy blue, and blue orange area, red blue orange is essentially stage 3 in Fowler's model, okay, which we talk about on this channel as well, for those of you who are new, who might be watching this later. So there's like there's a healthy blue, and there's an egoic blue. There's a healthy orange, and there's an egoic orange. There's a healthy green, and there's an egoic green. So what we're seeing in our society today with all the DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, the woke stuff, the cancel culture, all that stuff is egoic green, okay? There is a good green, which is genuine, authentic concern for your environment, for things that are around you. Like I don't like making things trashy or unnecessarily. I try to participate. I try to throw things away and participate in recycling where I can and where I think it's going to the right place. Not going to get into that, but you become more concerned with the effect that you're having on things, and that you might be having an unnecessarily detrimental effect where you're externalizing harm to the commons unnecessarily. So how can you operate in a way that externalizes as little harm as possible to the commons, to the common area? So the green that we don't like is typically egoic green. We see a lot of that in society. Okay. But there is a more healthy version, a less egoic version of green in first tier consciousness. So when we look at banner waving, okay, if you're waving around a Christian flag, saying a pledge to the Christian flag, you are egoic blue. That's your consciousness level, if you really believe in doing that. If you are at church waving around the rainbow flag and all that kind of stuff, you are egoic green. Okay. Both of them are doing banner waving. Both of them are egoic. Neither of them are the authentic self. Okay. None of them are great. So just swapping out the content doesn't make any kind of banner waving better than the other kind of banner waving. So the passages I was pointing out here, what these came to mind is carnality is associated with strife and divisions. Okay, walking as men, you bite and devour one another. Okay, so when we go back to this banner waving stuff, it's all, this one over here says, hate has no home here. Well, we don't advocate hate around here. We advocate love. But then when you have all these banners like this, they're fueling and promoting intergroup rivalry. You either have to wear this banner with us and shut up about your perspective, or we hate you. So they're saying they're against hate, but they're actually spreading hate for a different reason in many cases, which is also not good. That's a lot of comments there, Jamie. Might be spamming the comment section. I'd like to see some other comments as well. Now we're going to move in our agenda over to accepted but not okay. Accepted but not okay. What does this mean? You hear that phrase, oh, everyone's accepted. You're okay just like you are. And like Jordan Peterson says, what a terrible thing to tell like an 18-year-old young man. You're okay just like you are. You better be different when you're 40 than when you were 18. Come to find out, you actually are not okay like you are. And the reason we are engaging in a intentional transformational journey is because we are in recognition that we are not the best that we could be, and we have some movement to make, some progress to make, genuine progress. All change isn't necessarily progress. So we accept everyone, Christians in the Ephesians 4:16 model, we accept everyone as they are under the auspices that we know we need to transform and improve in some way. We are here to cultivate fresh capacities for wisdom in ourselves and in others. Since we don't have that wisdom now, we do not know what changes that wisdom will bring. So if I start waving a banner around, the wisdom that I gain tomorrow may let me know that it's not such a good idea to wave that banner around. Okay? So to align ourselves under a particular banner is to claim that the extent of wisdom has been reached on that front. Okay? As soon as you pick up a banner and start waving it, they're like, what you're essentially saying is that there's no more wisdom to be gained in this area. We've already got it all, and this is our marching orders. So we must find a true balance. We must find the balance between accepting people as they are to the degree that they are not stigmatized or ostracized, but also recognize that we are in the business of becoming radically different than how we are now. So yeah, I accept you as you are, as long as you don't plan to stay how you are. And that goes for everybody. Everybody. Not just the people who are, not like how I like them. Interesting that everybody's version of Jesus is just like them pretty much. We cannot. So we are in the business of becoming radically different than how we are now. We cannot pre-specify what we will retain and what we will shed along the way. Jordan Peterson is an interesting stint in his most recent conversation with Joe Rogan, where he essentially, when he talks about good dialogue with somebody where it's interesting, as you're dialoguing with somebody else and as you're in dialogos, you're actually like in a card game where you discard things you don't need. when you're interacting with somebody and having a good interaction, you are discarding parts of yourself or parts of things you think or parts of things you think you understood in exchange for what's coming in through the dialogue. So what do you need to shed along the way? I don't know if I can make you see that word shed down there, but I can't make that logo not there. There we go. What you will shed along the way. So we want to have an upward trajectory. And that upward trajectory, it's like in 2 Corinthians 2, notice this word perfect here, okay? This word perfect. That doesn't mean flawless. It doesn't mean sinless. It means fully matured, fully ready kind of thing. That your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. Howbeit, Paul's telling the carnal Corinthians, we speak wisdom among them that are perfect, yet not the wisdom of this world, nor the prince of this world that come to naught. But the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him, neither can he know them because they are spiritually discerned. And that's not talking about lost people who can't hear the gospel. It's saying the same thing as just a couple of verses later. I could not speak unto you as unto spiritual, but as unto carnal, even as unto babes in Christ. So when he says the natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, he's talking about babes in Christ. He's not talking about lost people, okay? I have fed you with milk and not with meat, for hitherto you were not able to bear it, neither yet now are ye able. So when it comes to this information that we were discussing on this other slide, there should be a constant forward movement of going from natural, carnal, limbic system into wiser. Yeah. Moving into some wisdom. And kind of as we started off with, your upward trajectory. There's a huge difference between those two things. We don't want to have ostracizing and stigmatizing people for wherever they are on their journey, nor do we want to endorse every proclivity people have, okay? Because people still need some transforming to do, and that decision for them is not ours to make. So there's a huge difference between these two things. We aim to strike a balance that does not cross into either of these boundaries. And we want to have a realistic assessment. What do you mean have a realistic assessment? Well, because of our Christian in groups, let's say somebody is gay. They have moralistic virtue signaling reasons to be in denial that they are gay. But if you're in denial of where you are, then you don't know where to start from to grow. So you can't make a growth plan because you haven't correctly identified your starting place. So it reminds me of there's a joke where somebody's in, I don't know, there's somebody over in the British Isles and they ask somebody for directions. They're like, do you know how to get there? Yeah, I know how to get there, but I wouldn't start from here. Something like that. I wouldn't start from here. Okay, well, where would you start from? So you kind of have to know where you are so that you can start following the directions. And if somebody is gay, they need to be able to say, I've done a self-assessment and I'm attracted, they need to be able to say that. They need to be able to admit it to themselves. If they think it's theirs to do to stay that way, that's their choice to make. If they think it's theirs to do to try to alter that in some way, that's their choice to make. But they need to be able to make an honest assessment about what that is. Kind of like establishing a baseline when you're working out and you're starting an exercise plan or a workout program. What are you trying to do? Okay, I want to be able to do X, Y, Z. I want to be able to bench 300 pounds. Well, how much can you bench now? You want to lie about that? If you lie and say you can bench 250 when really you can only bench 150, you're going to have a bad day on your first workout. So people need to be able to do a realistic assessment of where they really are and not be ostracized or stigmatized for it. In order for people to plot out a course for transformation and aim at it properly, they must know where they are starting from. This means that they must be able to honestly and accurately evaluate where they are in a particular area. Where are you on Fowler's stages of faith? Where are you on spiral dynamics? Where are you with whatever's going on with you? Now, if we erect moralistic lines of acceptance and rejection to our in-group on the forefront, this injects unhelpful pressure to align with a certain set of moralistic standards adopted by the in-group, but without the wisdom that would lead to that alignment organically or internally. Kevin, what on earth did you just say? If I have an in-group and I say, hey, everybody in this in-group, we wear turtle shell glasses. Everybody in our in-group wears turtle shell glasses. Well, if people want to be in the in-group and they feel pressure to belong somewhere, they might go get turtle shell glasses without really embodying the wisdom behind the choice that resulted in turtle shell glasses. You see? Not put anything else there. Let's say your church all uses a particular Bible version. Your church is all King James only. Well, if you state that on the forefront, and the people joining the church want to be part of the group, they will adopt this position of being King James only without actually embodying the wisdom that produces decisions that results in somebody becoming that way organically. See? And you don't want an in-group full of people like that. You don't want an in-group like that. It doesn't matter what it is, okay? So if you're waving the rainbow flag around, or King James onlyism around, or Reformed theology around, or Black Lives Matter around, it's all the same. It doesn't matter. Whatever you're waving around, this is what our group supports. Then people will feel the pressure to support that externally while not embodying the wisdom that might have led to a real or organic reason to support that. So that's what I'm saying in this sentence here. If we erect moralistic lines of acceptance and rejection on the forefront as the threshold of entry into our in-group, this injects unhelpful pressure into them to align with a certain set of moralistic standards adopted by the in-group. You must behave this way. But without the wisdom that would lead to that alignment organically or internally. So even if waving a particular banner was great, okay? Listen closely here. Even if a particular banner was great, you don't want people to choose it because the group is waving it. You want people to arrive there organically and because they've embodied the wisdom that is commensurate with arriving there. Do you get that? You have to get that. You have to get that. That's very important. I'm going to say it again. Even if there was a banner that was perfectly correct and perfectly right, you still wouldn't want to wave it around as a reason to join your group, because then it would influence people to adopt the banner before they embody the wisdom that would lead to the decisions that would lead to that banner organically and intrinsically. And so you want people to get there organically and intrinsically. And when you're not signaling all of the things that you think are right, and then you can more properly assess whether or not somebody is convergent with you on their journey. If I think XYZ, but I'm not waving it around as a banner, and then somebody else on their journey, in their studies, and in their transformative processes and practices, if they also come to XYZ, there's a little convergence there, like, oh, that's a little validation that maybe there's something there. But if I'm saying, hey, I'm XYZ, and people think I'm cool, or the in-group's cool, they want to be part of it, they will say XYZ too, and I have no idea whether or not they've actually embodied the wisdom, or also, I could be wrong. And one of the reasons I don't want to unduly influence somebody with the banner that I'm waving is because if my banner's wrong, let me see where their journey takes them, because I might be able to learn from their journey if I don't unduly prejudice it, if I don't unduly bias it with where my journey's taken me. So you kind of have a hands-off, cradle the head approach where you're trying not to poison the well of people as you are attempting to help them along in their journey of growth and transformation. I used to say this all the time back when I was in the Independent Baptist Church. I was a big believer in all the legalistic things like no TV, women are in skirts and dresses, no mixed bathing, and never go outside without a shirt on, all that kind of stuff. I was all into all that stuff. Don't drink, smoke, or chew, run around with those who do. And it occurred to me at one point that maybe we should stop teaching that people should do that, because if you tell people what all the standards are, then they can just do them, even if they haven't embodied the wisdom that brought them to realize that they need to do those things. And I was thinking, even back then, if we don't teach these standards, then we can assess people's spirituality genuinely as they realize from the Holy Spirit in the Bible that they should be behaving this way, instead of from being told by us. There's actually a little bit of signal there, I think. So banner waving is a lot like sloganeering. Slogan. You know what the word slogan means? It means cry of the dead. The book Crowds and Power by Elias Canetti. The Celts of the Scottish Highlands have a special word for the host of the dead, slough, I'll not pronounce that, meaning spirit multitude. The spirits fly about in great clouds like starlings up and down the face of the world and come back to the scenes of their earthly transgressions. They fight battles in the air as men do on earth, that may be heard and seen on clear frosty nights, advancing and retreating, retreating and advancing against one another. After a battle, their crimson blood may be seen staining the rocks and the stones. The word germ means shout or cry, and Sloganeering was the battle cry of the dead. Thus, this word later became slogan. The expression we use for the battle cries of our modern crowds derives from the Highland hosts of the dead. So it's interesting to me that the mindlessness and de-individuation, I have a picture of a bunch of zombies here. Isn't it interesting how what are zombies doing? They're always moving around in hordes. They can't think for themselves. And what do they want to eat? They want to eat your brains. Okay? That's exactly what Calvinism, provisionism, all that stuff does. Got a bunch of Calvinists, provisionists running around. What do? They move around in hordes as a group. They have a group identity. There's no individuation. They're not thinking for themselves. They're part of the group. And what do they want to do? They want to eat brains. That's exactly what Calvinism does. It's exactly what provisionism does. The Jumanji, Dungeons and Dragons versions of Christianity, you become part of the group, and your capacity to think and participate in the Ephesians 4:16 edification model and have a perspective to offer has just been taken from you, and now you can't be part of the group unless you outsource your perspective to the one single perspective of the in-group, which we've all written down in a systematic theology and a statement of faith, and you have to have that perspective or you can't be part of our group. Well, what is that? That's an echo chamber, people. Okay, that's groupthink. That's what that is. We have to find a way to have in-groups that still retain perspectival individualism. So mindlessness and de-individuation both come with sloganeering in-groups, regardless of the basis of being an in-group. So whether you're waving around a King James Bible or a rainbow flag, it's doing this to people. Either way, doesn't matter. No one is not better than the other with regard to this aspect. So let's double click on some of these things. I have some information here. This slide is really small, so I made subsequent slides that blow this up to bigger font. But I have these references down here, which I don't have a separate slide for those. We're going to look at these. We're going to look at what these are. So De-individuation, that's what we're looking at here. We're going to look at these paragraphs blown up. Okay. De-individuation and group behavior. De-individuation is a concept introduced by social psychologist Philip Zimbardo, which describes the loss of self-awareness and individual accountability in group settings. Zimbardo's research suggests that individuals in a group are more likely to engage in behavior that they might not normally consider if they were alone. This is due to a perceived loss of personal responsibility and a heightened sense of anonymity within the group. What about groupthink? Irving Janis was introduced to the concept of groupthink, which occurs when the desire for harmony or conformity with a group results in an irrational or dysfunctional decision-making outcomes. Groupthink leads members to suppress dissenting opinions, overlook potential problems, and adhere to group norms and decisions without critically evaluating them. This often results in a loss of individual creativity and independent thinking. We don't want that to be going on. Social identity theory. Henry Tajfel's social identity theory posits that individuals derive a significant part of their self-concept from their membership in social groups. This identification with the in-group can lead to in-group favoritism and out-group discrimination, which is exactly what's going on with our banner-waving folks. Stage 3, stage 4, blue, green, red, orange, all that stuff. When individuals strongly identify with their group, they are more likely to conform to its norms and values, often without critical examination, to maintain a positive self-image and social cohesion. So there's pressure there. What about the impact of ideology? This is very, very important because some of you think, oh, it's a content thing. I have Christian content in my ideology and that makes it better. It does not. Okay? The content of a group's ideology does not significantly alter this tendency of groupthink. Whether the group is defined by a political ideology, a religious belief, or a social movement, the mechanisms of conformity, de-individuation, and groupthink operate similarly. Studies have shown, so what's happening with Calvinism and provisionism, the provisionists think that if I swap out wrong groupthink content for correct groupthink content, that solves the problem. No, you're still all outsourcing your perspective to one perspective. It's just different content now. So that's why it's very important to understand that swapping out the content while you're still in Jumanji or you're still in Dungeons and Dragons world is not any better than the other content. Now, it might be a different stepping stone on your journey of transformation that you have to go through. Maybe you have to go through provisionism before you can wake up. And that's fine. And that's fine. But it should never be seen as a stopping point. Studies have shown that both liberal and conservative groups can exhibit these behaviors, as can religious and secular organizations. The key factor is the strength of the group's identity and the individual's identification with it, not the specific content of the group's belief. Are you hearing me? Because provisionists think that because we have better content, because we have more correct content, even though it's based on all the wrong framing still, same wrong framing. Because we have better content, that means that our in-group is better, but all this same stuff happens. The de-individuation, the groupthink, the echo change, or like Dan says, you have new buzzwords, no change, new arena, new buzzwords, no change, stuck in a revolving door. Or, like Paul says, tossed about with every wind of doctrine. Children, tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. I don't understand this comment. My Duke Cannon shampoo. says, we're pretty sure you can figure this out. What a great parallel to New Testament religion. I say we ban shampoo, demand real poo. That stuff's a sham. Impact of ideology. So then the metaphor of zombies, because I just showed zombies a second ago on this slide. So the metaphor of zombies, as we've gone through the de-individuation, the groupthink, the social identity theory, the impact of ideology, what about this zombie metaphor? The metaphor of zombies eating the brains of their adherents captures the essence of this psychological phenomenon. Just as zombies in fiction lose their individuality and mindlessly follow the horde, individuals in a strongly cohesive group can lose their ability to think critically and independently. This results in a figurative consumption of their cognitive faculties by the group, leading to a state where they no longer think for themselves, but rather adopt the group's mentality uncritically. And if you can't see that word mentality, I feel like I'm always trying to get away from something that's covering up the screen. We've showed this slide before. There are many problems with ideology. These are unavoidable, inevitable problems with ideology. It doesn't matter what the ideology is. If it's Calvinism, if it's provisionism, if it's environmentalism, you see, if it's veganism, it doesn't matter what the ideology is. It results in these things: groupthink and orthodoxy, confirmation bias, lack of viewpoint diversity, suppression of dissent, polarization and tribalism, loss of critical thinking, intolerance of alternative views, erosion of academic freedom, ideological echo chambers, inhibition of institutionalized disconfirmation. I start showing lists like this to people who are provisionists, and they're like, oh, but we don't want this to happen. Like, it doesn't matter that you don't want it to happen. It doesn't matter that this isn't the goal that you want. When you have proposition-centric, there's 4 kinds of knowing down here at the bottom, okay? When your particular ideology stacks up down here at the proposition level, it's all these lists of things. This is what you get. This is what you get. Moral absolutism, identity politics, intellectual stagnation, ideological extremism, suppression of diversity, suppression of dissent, lack of empathy, authoritarianism, group polarization, dehumanization of opponents, ideological dogmatism, inflexibility and rigidity, polarization and divisiveness, intolerance and discrimination, ideological purity tests, cult-like behavior, loss of individuality, emotional manipulation, witch hunts, and heresy hunters. It's taken me a while into my adulthood to realize how much of a cult my independent Baptist upbringing was. I thought cults were elsewhere. I thought cults were the Mormons, the Jehovah's Witnesses, that kind of thing, or like some of the Heaven's Gate or David Koresh or something like that. But what it's taken me a while to come to grips with, and it's still hard to accept, is that the independent Baptist ideology in which I was raised is just as much of a cult as any of those things. So where are we now? I want to talk about counseling and guidance. Counseling and guidance. And what we want to do with people is avoid external decisions. Avoid external decisions. Do not decide for people and do not pre-endorse certain paths for people. So when you wave a banner around, you say, I'm King James only. What you are doing is you are pre-endorsing and pre-deciding on behalf of other people as far as your recommendation is concerned what they should do. And that's pressure. If they don't like you, they're probably less likely to consider being King James only. If for whatever reason they're attached or attracted to the in-group, they may decide to adopt that banner without having researched anything or embodied the wisdom that led to it in the first place. So, in the same way that a counselor would be very careful not to pre-specify for people the choices they should make, what we don't understand is that the banners that we wave around have that effect on people, even if we don't realize that that's the effect that it's having. If you make decisions for people, you rob them of the agency that they need to develop for the skill set of making their own decisions. Okay? The act of deciding is a skill set that needs to be developed. And if you're constantly deciding for people or telling people where they should be, what they should believe, then they will just adopt to the in group. They're not learning how to make their own decisions. Now, if you tell somebody what to do, yes, you should get married. Yes, you should get divorced. If you tell somebody what to do, if your recommendation goes well and it works out for them, then the success is still creditable to you. The success is still creditable to an entity outside of themselves, and they still haven't developed any decision-making capability. Okay, so you haven't really helped them. You haven't taught the man to fish. Okay. Now, if your recommendation goes poorly, then the failure will create an externally oriented resentment. Oh, he told me to get married and it's going terribly. I should never have listened to him. Now, when your life's going terribly, instead of taking personal responsibility to make it better, you blame it on Kevin because he's the one that told you to get married. So if your recommendation goes poorly, then the failure will create an externally oriented resentment. This is very poisonous. And the person will place the blame and responsibility outside themselves for what went wrong. They are no better at taking responsibility for their own choices and actions, and they are no better at making decisions. Now, resentment and failure is piled on top of that. So now I'm no better at making decisions than I was before. Now I'm resentful about what happened and I failed. So I have to bear all that cost. And resentment is a very, very deceptive, lying devil. And if that thing gets in your head and gets a hold of you, you are in trouble. So whether it's a rainbow flag or a sign that says Baptist, these symbols serve as pre-endorsements of choices that align with the content of those ideologies. Waving and endorsing a banner of any kind constitutes an externality toward which people will assign the success or failure. Now, we want to cultivate internal decision-making authority in people without spoiling them or influencing them to be biased toward a particular direction that is external to them. I'm going to say that again. We want to cultivate internal decision-making authority in people without spoiling them or influencing them to be biased toward a particular direction that is external to them. So when Paul says in Colossians chapter 2, verse 8, beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy or vain deceit, one of the things that I think is being said there is beware of adopting ideologies that you haven't earned, that you haven't embodied the wisdom to arrive at. It basically spoils you. It's almost like it inoculates you. If there is anything good there, adopting it before you have the wisdom of it, it's like inoculating you against it so you can never catch the real thing. It's like a vaccination. You get vaccinated against wisdom by taking a poorer, weaker version of it when you don't have the wisdom capacity to hold it yet. That's why it's very, very important not to preach ideology, the profane and vain babbling, not to preach provisionism, not to preach Calvinism. It's very important not to preach those things, because then people will come to embody those things and they think they're taking in Christianity. And then if Christianity is ever really presented to them, they have been inoculated against it effectively. Excuse me. I wish someone who I respected forced me to get married. I wish somebody who I respected forced me not to. I got the opposite problem from you. Now let's talk about ego. What do we say when we're talking about ego? What are we talking about here? Okay. And there we go. When we talk about ego, bring this passage up here. We are essentially talking about, let me make this really big so you can see it. Hopefully you can see it. We're going to go to Romans 7:17. Paul says, verse 16, if I do that which I would not, I consent unto the law that it is good. Now then, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. Now, if I do that which I would not, it's no more I that do it, but sin that dwelleth in me. Verse 20. So verse 17 and 20 in Romans chapter 7. Now, Paul uses the word ego here. We're not going to be using that word ego like that, okay? We're going to be using it differently. But basically, the I that doesn't sin is what we're going to call something like the real you, the authentic self, whatever you want to call it. Somebody got upset because I was saying authentic self and they thought I was adopting new age terminology. And I'm like, oh my gosh, spare me. They're just words, okay? And because of people like that, I have to go back to stage 3 language and disambiguate for people. Oh, the part of you that doesn't sin. Just let me say authentic self. And yeah, mercy. Anyways, just words, people. Think about what it's pointing to. What we're calling the ego for the sake of this presentation and many of our other presentations is the part that's doing the sin. If sin is still occurring, but it's not the real you that's doing it, what part is it? What part is missing the mark? Okay. We say missing the mark. People ask me that. And that is the word harmatia. Okay. It is it's an archery term, which means missing the mark. And it's interesting here because on my olive tree, it actually says missing the mark. And here it's like an abridged version or something like that doesn't have the entire, New Age boogeyman doesn't have the entire definition of the word. But that's essentially what we're talking about. Okay. When I'm saying ego, I'm talking about the part of you that sins. Now, what we want to do with ego work is shed all the parts of you that are not you. We want to identify what they are. What are all the parts of you that are not you? Okay. And you may strongly and very emotionally identify with some things, very hard, very strongly. Okay. Maybe you're a patriot. You're like, oh yes, I'm an American, but you're identified that way. Maybe you're a real strong Republican or a real strong Democrat. You really identify hard. And I'm a church going person. I'm a Christian. I'm a Presbyterian, whatever it is you are. And you identify very strongly with something like this. Or I like driving this kind of car. I'm guilty of this. I traded in my truck a while ago and I still miss that thing. I liked being known as the guy who had that truck. Now I like the vehicle that I have now too, but I liked that one. Maybe it's our jobs. Maybe it's your family. Maybe it's the kind of music you listen to. You see people who, if somebody listens to goth or they listen to country, and I see them in the mall, I can tell you who's who by the way they dress and who they're hanging out with. Okay. Maybe you like external validation, people approving of you. Maybe you're attached to your friend group. Maybe you're attached to the load that you're bearing. You're a good cook and you like to barbecue. Maybe you're really big into sports fanning. Maybe you like your house. Maybe you're a good musician. All these things, we can see we get emotionally identified with these things, and we think that we are these things. And so let me just throw a few more things in there. Maybe some of these banners that we had earlier. Okay. Oh, I'm really, don't tread on me, patriot. I'm really, Christian flag waving Christian. I'm all this kind of stuff. I believe in love is love. All you emotionally identify with that. So emotionally identifying with none of that stuff is you. You are not your in-group affiliation. That's not you. That's not the part of you that doesn't sin. You are not your sexual orientation. You are not your sexual activity. You are not your emotions. You aren't any of those things. So if a church decides to take up banner waving, start saying, hey, we're accept all XYZ kind of people, and we're gonna wave that flag, no matter what it is, then what we're doing is we are perpetuating egoic attachments that people have to these things, and we're reinforcing those egoic attachments. And what we should be doing is trying to be knocking those egoic attachments free and loose. And not just the ones we don't like. I had to knock loose my King James onlyism, had to knock loose my independent Baptist identification, knock loose the idea of being a pastor and a religious leader of some kind. None of those. Those aren't me. It's not me. And anything else you want to mention? Thanks for the super chat. One day, I'm trying to get my mouse over where I want it. Yeah. I don't care what stage a person is in. If their banner supports the mutilation of children, my banner is to stay away from our children. Now, you want to protect the children. The children are the future. And you don't want to spoil them. You don't want anybody else spoiling them either, physically or otherwise. So that's valid to protect people, I would say. We've looked at some of these before. Your emotional identity attachments are kind of like tentacles. Like tentacles, we extend our emotional attachments out into our jobs, our social circle, our hobbies, our relationships, our accomplishments, our achievements, our belief systems, our knowledge, being right and correct. I have all the right answers. I win debates, group affiliations, skills, belongings, music, reputation, preferences, politics, nationality, debates, sports teams, etc. These emotional attachments constitute our identity. Well, which is what we refer to when we say ego. And one of the things when you're waking up is that you recognize those things actually are not your identity. Now, we think that these things are enriching, right? Don't we? But it's only in the reeling in of these emotional attachments. Like in other words, you reel in your tentacles and let the things go. Whatever your tentacles are wrapped around, let it go and bring those tentacles back in. Realize you aren't those things. We basically have extended cognition, 4E cognition, extended cognition into the things that we are emotionally attached to. We think these things are enriching, but it's only in the reeling in of these emotional attachments or the tentacles that we're holding those emotional attachments, and in the emotional identity and divestiture of all the things around which these tentacles are wrapped, that we can be in the richness of the authentic self. If you're having a hard time seeing that. Divest from all the things that your emotional tentacles are wrapped around, including all the banner waving stuff. Okay? All the banner waving stuff. Divest from it. Divest your emotional identity from it. If you're King James only and somebody says something that's against being King James only, be able to hear that without your fight or flight responses acting up in your body. That'd be a good goal to have for yourself. We're going to move next we moved from ego to cultivation of an internal locus of authority. Okay, cultivation of an internal locus of authority. Now remember, we're talking about banner waving. Parenting is successful when the child no longer requires parenting. In the same way, a ferry is successful when it gets the people or the cargo to the other side of the body of water. Once the other side is reached, you don't take the ferry with you. You leave it behind. As the child is to the adult, so the adult is to the sage. By the way, that's one thing that I'm going to do a video soon. And I'm going to give you a spoiler alert here about one thing to know before you get married. And that mainly is about developmental levels. What people don't realize oftentimes is that they're just because you're an adult doesn't mean you've done all the maturing that you're going to do. And if somebody is in second tier consciousness, if somebody is more mature and somebody else is not, and they're still in first tier consciousness, it's like being married to a child. So you can stick it out and you can stay married on paper and all that, but just like with a child, you probably can't have genuine companionship at the zone of proximal development that you need it from what is essentially a child. So if you marry somebody and you mature and grow and develop and they don't, you're basically going to be stuck married to a child. You need to understand that adult to adult, if one of them has woken up and grown up and the other one hasn't, both adults, and both could be like conscientious and hard workers and have good jobs and all that, but just nothing there. There's just nothing there, man. So recognize this. Now, parenting is supposed to help the child internalize the practices and decision-making capacities that they will need to be successful and to be a successful and mature adult. So remember, successful parenting is when the parent is no longer needed. Now, I think that mature religion should be this way too. Don't hear me the wrong way. Successful wisdom cultivation in adults brings them to the place where they are no longer dependent or reliant on external centers of authority for wise decision making. Now, this will sound like backsliding or apostasy to a religiously pathologized and underdeveloped mind, but it's actually the goal of mature religion. It is to directly realign the person back to the source of wisdom. Said directly realignment. Oh, I'm sorry. Directly religament. That's what I meant to say. The religio, religament. The goal of mature religion is to directly religament the person back to the source of wisdom. That's the goal. And once you are religamented, you no longer need these external sources of authority pointing you around, guiding you, and directing you. So if you're a church that's out there banner waving, what you're doing is you're bolstering externalized influence and externalized centers of decision making out to the group or out to the church or out to those kinds of things. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is similar to this, but I want to talk about group level resentment. Okay? Group level resentment. I seem to be missing some slides here. Not sure why. There they are. Well, maybe they are. I may have to end the show and restart it, which we will do if God permits. So group level resentment, your group identity relinquishes responsibility for your disposition to the group instead of taking it on individually. This removes agency from the individual and places it in the group, which is the wrong direction of action and responsibility for growth and wisdom cultivation. So let me give you a couple of examples of this. Maybe you're a minority. Maybe you're Black, and you're like, well, Black people get treated terribly, and I'm Black, therefore I'm mad and resentful about all the things. And if you're waiting for society to change the way it treats Black people, at least from your perspective, then you're waiting for something that is outside your span of control. And what you should be doing is cultivating the capacity so that you can adopt responsibility to be the one that changes your arena for the better. And when you outsource all that responsibility to somebody else, so say you're a Black female, say you're Hispanic, all these cross-sectional things. Now, I'm of the opinion that these kinds of things should not matter. But in our society, we have this cultural Marxism where the left has basically started making us racist again. Okay, and we're supposed to be leaving racism and sexism and all this kind of stuff, and it's like some people are pumping it back up to try to make it a thing again, so that they can create more in-group, out-group rivalry out of it. Okay, and I can do the same thing. Say, well, if all these other groups, if it's better and more preferred to be a minority or a woman or something like this in order to get hired or get ahead or something like that, the most hated group is straight white guys, right? Who wants to be that? And then especially, an old straight white guy, and I'm getting older every year, so I can get resentful about that, about the missed opportunities because being passed over for being hired or promoted because of your cross-sectionality, or being discriminated against in certain situations because of your cross-sectionality. And anybody can do this. Anybody can make yourself out to be a victim. And what you do is you hand over your agency and capacity to make your world better to something that's external to yourself, rather than taking on the responsibility for yourself. And so what I want to warn you of is, there's 18,000 people listening to this, so I'm sure we have all, the woods are full of them. We got all the things, I'm sure, in this audience, which is great. And what I want to warn you against is getting resentful because of your perception of how a group that you might belong to is being treated by society. Because there's going to be very little you can do about that, and resentment will eat you alive. So be very careful not to get resentful. So we have a super chat. I'll say thanks to One Day for the super chat. Apologize, understanding how damaging Calvinism and ideological possession is for children and healthy relationships. Thank you for your content. Working through all of this is very challenging. Yes, it is very challenging. That's why we're trying to take our time with it. So I appreciate the super chat. Kayla says, love is the affordance of choice. A parent will work to optimize a child's choice-making abilities to afford the child's future self more options. Exactly, as a mature religion should also do for people. Absolutely. So what happens when somebody has group-level resentment built in, right? These groups create layers of removal from first-hand agentic capacity. So if you're mad at society because you're Black and society is treating Blacks a certain way, if you're mad at society because you're purple with green hair and society is treating or you're gay or you're trans or you're a white male or whatever it is, okay? That group creates your identity in that group, seeing yourself as a group member instead of an individual. It creates layers of removal from first-hand agentic capacity, and therefore it makes those affected by the perceived oppression of the group unnecessarily vulnerable to resentment. And so I say perceived oppression because what I'm not trying to say that some oppression isn't real or isn't real. But what I am saying is that if you read something by, say, Viktor Frankl or Alexander Solzhenitsyn, what they went through is, concentration camps, gulags, okay, is way worse than anything we go over here, no matter who we are. And if they can find meaning and not be resentful after they went through some real stuff, that's probably the one to be more like, rather than the ones who are out there creating riots. So it makes us, those layers of removal from first-hand agentic capacity, that make us more susceptible to resentment. And resentment is not good for you. It's absolute poison for you. Okay? It makes the people dependent and powerless. And dependency also breeds resentment. That's something you may not know. If you are the provisioner or the provider for certain, you got teenagers, yeah. Dependency breeds resentment. Powerlessness breeds resentment. Okay. So you don't want to put yourself in a situation where, because of your group identity, you are dependent and powerless, because all that's going to do is be more and more tempting to become resentful. It's going to make you more and more vulnerable to give in to the temptation to become resentful. And you do not want that at all. I'm trying to find my mouse. This is interesting. Forging says he's very excited for FSI tomorrow, which I may be able to be there tomorrow. I'm pretty excited about that myself. Let's see what's going on here. So we can't be sitting back waiting for societal change to magically happen, which makes things get better for our group. The vision can grow bigger with maturity, but agency is more localized with maturity. Now, I want to talk about one more thing. And think about our scope of influence and what we can do. Our scope of influence, our scope of perception and agency. And I wonder if I have, I do have it. I just don't see it in my slides here. We don't want that. Typically, let me just go to this diagram here. Typically, if you look on the left-hand side, okay, a younger adult, let's say they're about 20 or so. A younger adult, they have far-reaching, idealistic, uniform plans for everyone. And that, if you're a Christian, everyone needs to get saved. Everyone needs to become a Baptist. Everyone, They, this 20-year-old who's idealistic, this 20-year-old knows how things should be and what everyone should be doing. They're more moralistic than practical. And I have them in front of a globe here. And they just want control and compliance. They want worldwide control and compliance. When you're a 20-year-old and you're an environmentalist, you want everybody to be forced to care for the environment like you think they should. When you're 20 and you're a radicalized Christian, you want everybody to be exposed to the gospel and everybody to receive Christ and follow the Bible and Christ just like you do. You want this control and compliance mentality with absolute never-ending expansion and full absorption of everything. And so your vision is utopic. Oh, I have the perfect way of how things should be. If we could just control them the way we think they should be, it would be the utopian society, and this is how it should be. Even Christians who are like, well, Christ is going to come back and set up his millennial reign, still utopian. And then they have intergroup rivalry. And it's like Agent Smith. They turn everyone into what they are. Everyone needs to be a Baptist or an environmentalist or a Calvinist or a provisionist or a vegan or do CrossFit or whatever it is they're into. That's how they are with the ideological. So the problem is, even though they have far-reaching idealistic plans for everyone to follow, everyone needs to do this, the problem is they cannot see the world, okay? They have very little, bring my pen back, they have very little perspectival capacity. So in other words, they want to make all these changes, but they can't perceive all the second and third order effects that are going to come as a result of those changes, which might externalize harm to the commons. They can't perceive that. They don't understand that. They just want to make all the changes because they think they know everything. So they can't see the world. And that's why one of the meditation practices we do is to, on each, as you breathe in, to consider a larger span geographically. So I see my neighborhood. Breathe in again. I see my city. Breathe in again. I see the parish I'm in, or the county I'm in, for the rest of you. Breathe in again. I see the state that I'm in. Breathe in again. I see the country that I'm in. Breathe in again. See the hemisphere that I'm in. Maybe the planet that I'm on. Maybe the solar system that I'm on. Maybe the galaxy that I'm in. You do this on purpose. Do breathing exercises. So your young adult doesn't have any awareness capacity to consider this. Okay. Now you're more mature adult, and so the problem is when we got stage 3 blue consciousness, green consciousness, egoic green people, and they're banner waving and everything. They're like this. They want all the far expanse of the world to all be like the way they think it should be. This utopian vision that they have. Now, as you get older, things change. Okay, and you stop doing some of the banner waving. Now compare from side to side. Instead of these far-reaching idealistic uniform plans for everyone, the more mature adult, they have modest ideas for how to make genuine improvements, how genuine improvements can be made without externalizing harm to the commons. Now they are more practical than moralistic. Over here, they're more moralistic than practical. This is how it should be done. And these people are more like, well, maybe that's how it should be done, but this is what we can actually do. This is the difference we can actually make. And instead of having a control and compliance reach for all around the world, they have more of a contextual perception, have a better understanding of what's going on. You have context in space. In other words, geographically, zoom out and consider how small you are and how big the world is, one little level at a time. Okay? Yeah, Google Maps will work for that. And have context in time. Like, where are you in the history of the world? What has come before you? What's coming next? And have context in processes and what's going on, how things are affected by procedural things. If I remove 500 fish from the ocean, how will it affect the ecosystem of the ocean? And these people, when you're wiser, you realize that there's no utopia and there's no nostalgia. If you age but don't mature, you go from being utopic to being nostalgic. And I wish it was the way it was. I wish it was this way. I wish it was like it was in the 50s. I wish it was like it was in the 70s. You have nostalgia. And you wish we could get back to the way it should be, back to the good old days. Okay. So the mature older adult, it's neither utopia nor nostalgia. Okay. Neither one of those things. And they're non-rivalrous. Okay. And instead of turning everybody into what they are, which is what the 20-year-old ideologue wants to do, they want to unclog people from their egoic identity attachments. Oh, you're attached to King James onlyism? How do I unclog you from that? Not convince you it's wrong. You see the difference? Not convince you it's wrong, but get you emotionally unidentified with it. There's a big difference between those two things. They get you emotionally unidentified with your sexual orientation. emotionally unidentified with whatever flag you're waving. So a more mature adult is going to be trying to knock loose those emotional identity attachments, which is very different than debating somebody to make them think that they're wrong. Because then they're just going to develop a new emotional identity attachment to something else that they think is right, and you haven't really solved the problem. They're just children tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. So you want to knock loose the emotional identity attachment, which is very different than convincing them that a particular thing is wrong. And you need to get that. And then they see the world with greater clarity and well-developed perspectival capacity. They can hold many different perspectives at one time without having to be attached to any one of them. Okay? So if you want to get people to be the mature adult, okay, it is not through banner waving. The banner waving of the fundamentalist churches or the progressive churches, and at the meta level, you see them as making the same error with different content. The fundamentalists think the progressives are apostatizing and becoming like the devil, and the progressives see the fundamentalists as mean, bigoted, and hateful and intolerant. Once you get to the meta beyond both of those, and you realize they're both doing the same kind of ideological banner waving thing. And that banner waving itself prevents people from becoming the mature adult, from developing that perspectival capacity, from developing the charity that they need, from stop being so left hemispherically dominant. So what did we look at so far today? The agenda that we have, I'm just going to go back to the agenda as a quick review for the banner waving stuff. This and this should not look different to you. Okay? Should look, if this looks repulsive, so should this. But it's just people are always asking me how to relate to like stage 3 people or people of a lower consciousness, and it's kind of like, and I have to, I'm in some situations where I cannot not be rivalrous with some people, and it's not the intent to be rivalrous, but when you want to protect the ones you love and they're being there's a constant onslaught against them, you've got to do something. And I just forgot what I was going to say because I started looking at some of these comments. But I remember what I was going to say. How do you view someone who is a danger without becoming rivalrous or resentful or hating them or giving into that? And the best thing, one of the things I can come up with, if you ever seen the movie, you remember the old movie back in the 80s, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? Well, they did a sequel to that, Honey, I Blew Up the Kid. And they took the toddler. And the toddler is a toddler, but he's the size of a skyscraper. So he's this huge toddler walking around in the city. And I forget the exact details of the movie, but he's, probably stepping on cars and breaking trees, everything, and breaking buildings. And he's destroying a lot of stuff. And so the people who are, especially with technology these days, the people who you have to deal with in your life that are rivalrous and antagonistic and stage 3 and hateful and just can't operate correctly or maturely. It's a lot like that toddler. They have the maturity and the mental capacity of a young child, and they just don't know any better, but they have the destructive capacity of this huge creature. So they have great destructive capacity, the ability to destroy a lot of things like a hurricane or a tornado. And then, so could you really be mad at a toddler? I don't know. Maybe you can. Speaking of these movies. So the agenda we looked at was looking at beginner's mind, having the concept that you are accepted as you are, but you're not okay as you are. Like, you can come join the edification process, but the expectation is that you need to change and develop and grow. And then we talked about realistic assessments. You need to be able to assess what you really are, where you really are, and be able to say that without being ostracized from some kind of in group. Because if you don't know where you really are, you can't start plotting a course for growth. We talked about sloganeering as a mindless death cry, and banner waving is the same thing as sloganeering. It's a mindless death cry for zombies. We talked about how counseling and guidance should not pre-approve particular paths on behalf of people. And when you're banner waving, you're essentially telling them what you moralistically approve of, which might not be what's best for them on their growth journey. Talked about egoic identity attachments should not be promoted and celebrated. And if people are attached to these banners, then as a religious institution, we should not be adopting people's egoic attachments as our banners. We also talked about cultivating an internal locus of authority to where people can make decisions in and of themselves without having to rely on any kind of external person, agency, authority, or group or ideology to be making the decision for them. That's something I wish I would have known 25 years ago. Talked about group level resentment. You don't want to become resentful because of some kind of perceived oppression that may be happening to a group with which you identify. You don't want to be resentful at all. But that group level identity makes you more vulnerable to group level resentment, which is another reason to steer clear of that banner waving group identity kind of thing as part of your egoic self. And then we talked about your scope of perception and agency, where we showed the young person and the older, more mature person. So I think we're going to end it there. Thanks everybody who's in the chat. Thanks everybody who's watching. May the Lord bless you and good day.